Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We apologize for the slight delay in the program. Up next, we have the Enduring Journey, Embracing Diversity and Inclusion in Our Communities. May we invite Dr. Park on stage for his opening remarks, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's FOI panel, Enduring Journey, Embracing Diversity and Inclusion in Our Communities. My name is Jung-Hyun Park, and I'm delighted to serve as your moderator for this important discussion. The topic of diversity and inclusion resonates deeply across all the sectors of the society. As our communities become more diverse, whether in terms of race, gender, or culture, ability, or other dimensions, it is both a privilege and a challenge to navigate the complexities and opportunities that come with the diversity. We are here to examine how we can not only foster diversity, but also create some inclusive environments where everyone feels heard and valued. This means going beyond mere representation and ensuring that inclusion is embedded in the very fabric of our communities and institutions. Today's panelists bring a wealth of knowledge and experience from government sector to higher education institutions. They will share their insights on the range of topics, including how to develop some inclusive strategies, the role of education in appreciating diversity, and the significance of the community engagement in driving social change. Each of our panelists brings a unique viewpoint on how we can make the promise of the inclusion as a reality. I look forward to some insightful discussion, and I encourage all of you to take part in this conversation by sharing your thoughts as we move forward. With that, let's dive into the discussion. I'd like to invite our first panelist, Assistant Professor Srija, to the floor. Professor Srija, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We are here to discuss a very important topic of ethics around a variety of issues. I specifically will talk about transitions. Now, transitions can be of various kinds: socio-technical, environmental, digital transitions. I'll particularly focus on environmental transitions. Issues around ethics are not new, especially when we talk about environmental issues. But I'll talk about, in today's world where we are dealing with effects of climate change, how existing disparities, be it socioeconomic, be it based on the kind of livelihoods that you depend on. For a variety of reasons, there are existing disparities in the society which can be made worsened by the pace at which these transitions are happening. So I'll talk a bit about what are the ethical concerns that should be kept in mind as policies are being designed to deal with transitions. Who are the communities, which are the groups which shouldn't be left out of these transitions, and more importantly, existing vulnerabilities and existing disparities should not be exacerbated because we weren't paying attention to these communities in policy design. Now, I'd just like to start with a quote from one of the projects that I was involved in several years ago, which looked at adaptive policymaking, or how policymaking can adapt to changes over time, changes in the policy context. As we navigate progress in the 21st century, we must learn to look at policymaking as adaptive. So we use a metaphor to equate policymaking to gardening. It is muddy, it needs attention, and it's experiential because you learn over time with experience, because we do not really know what growing conditions will prevail. And I thought this is a good way to kind of start thinking about the future. When we think about the future, whose future are we talking about? Whose lens is important when we think about the future, and how that shapes the way we design our policies? Whose opinions matter? and whose opinions are kept aside just because they do not have a voice or a reach into the policy design agenda or formulation. So just starting a bit on whose vision for the future matters, I'll start a bit on environmental ethics. Now, movements around environmental goods and resource use is not new. We've seen in different countries, environmental movements have shaped the way communities use the environment, and other stakeholders have come into conversations around environment. So there are several ethical issues around extraction, sharing, as well as use of environmental resources, not only current, but also for future generations, and their alteration for human consumption. And what we are concerned about is maintenance of critical ecological thresholds, which should not be crossed. And there is already evidence that some of these critical thresholds are at the risk of being crossed in different parts of the world. There are also skewed environmental impacts of economic activities on the poor, who are the closest to these resources, and they have triggered environmental movements and protests around the world. And this is not new. This has been happening for several decades across the world. It can also be termed as environmentalism of the poor. Often we'll find instances of many industrial activities or waste generation activities being sited close to places where there are poor communities, low-income communities. And there have been studies in the US which have actually traced how is it that there were neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods, where some of these polluting activities took place, or some of these activities which had impact, which contaminated groundwater or caused some health impacts, were happening in neighborhoods which were low income. There have been instances of agricultural lands being affected by mining activities. Several Save the Seeds campaign against multinational companies and genetically modified the advent of kind of new seeds coming in, hybrid seeds coming in, and a lot of backlash against traditional seed by farmers who grew traditional varieties of seeds. Also traditional fisheries affected by modern industrial fishing, and infrastructural development such as dams causing displacement of communities, and also where some of the infrastructure is sited. In environmental studies, we have this we have this phrase, "not in my backyard" syndrome. So if there's a waste management facility which has to be sited, everyone agrees it's a good idea, but not in my backyard. So ultimately, it gets sited in places where people are not that vocal, or they do not have the power to say, "not in my backyard." So these issues are not new, but they definitely have become much, much important in today's times when we are talking of transitions happening at a very rapid phase. What are the existing vulnerabilities and existing issues around environmental ethics which have made a comeback of sorts and do need deeper conversations around as we move ahead with these transitions? Now, this was a press conference which then US Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was part of in 2002, where he was being asked what evidence does the US government have to link terrorist activities in a particular country. And in a typical sort of policy convoluted answer, he said, there are known knowns, which are things which we know. There are also known unknowns. That is, these are things which we know that we don't know. But the most difficult category is unknown unknowns, where we do not know that we do not know. It just tells us about the way, so his categorization has been used by many people. It's given rise to this idea of thinking about what are some of these unknown unknowns, which can really impact our vision when we think of long-term decision making. We see a number of issues where there is uncertainty and there's a lot of risk. There's part of it which is known, and there's a part of it which we do not know enough yet to make good decisions, be it on autonomous vehicles, AI, nuclear, climate change, epidemics, and genetically modified organisms. or food safety in general. But an interesting category is also the kind of issues that we choose not to know. I was in conversation with a policymaker several years ago on a climate change action plan, and we were talking to this person about sea level rise scenarios. And he said sea level rise is an issue only if you accept that this is a problem. Around ethics of climate change, the term common but differentiated responsibility came in from the UN FCCC. It's important as we think about how to share the responsibility and burden of climate change. The ones who are most affected are also those who are least capable of managing the impacts of climate change. There are several issues around who has the right to develop, who should pay for the heavy industrialization which has already happened, and how about compensating those who are likely to lose. There are also issues around ethics of problem framing. There are several risk profiles based on race, gender, age, geographic location, if you're located in a precarious geography, socioeconomic status, occupation, and many others. Now, vulnerability of resource-dependent communities, there are changes in the way humans are interacting with the environment. There are also changes to traditional means of resource use, such as seeds, land grabbing and eviction of indigenous communities, who often lack alternative skill sets, such as farmers. That's what they've done for generations. And when such land grabbing happens, they sort of, if they lose access to these resources, it sets them on this vicious cycle of poverty due to resource dependency. And there's also the risk of displacement, which is also associated with loss of cultural identities when people have to move out of the only land that they've ever associated with. I won't go into details of the urban population specifically. I just want to draw your attention to this chart, which talks about when we think of urban sustainability. So you see this orange line, which shows the less served population, and the pink, which shows the better served population. So be it electricity, be it water, be it sanitation, sustainability for whom are the ones who are better served, constantly getting better served, and the ones who are underserved are consistently getting less underserved and losing the opportunities which come with improved sustainability. Just moving to the last two slides on can science save us? Possibly, but oftentimes scientists come out with a number of suggestions of you can do this or that, but having many options actually counts to no action. And what if the projections that we are producing and assumptions, these are wrong? What does it hold? How will it affect some of these already marginalized communities? There are also suggestions which we are giving which are scientifically valid, but practically unfeasible from a political standpoint. There might be communities which were historically marginalized, and they are not featuring in the same way in these scientific projections. I work a lot on policy piloting, but there are issues with policy trials as well. The word experiment in general and trial, while it evokes a positive sentiment for general population, for indigenous communities, it evokes a very negative sentiment. So there are ethical issues with this idea of policy trials as well. We are also very objective in some of our scientific results, but objectivity without context can also impact how ethical some of our policy suggestions are. Scientific precision may not always be needed for policy making, especially when we are thinking of ethics. There's also a risk of acting too soon versus too late. When we think of climate change, action is needed, but is it too soon? Are we using scientific results very early scientific results to design some of these policies? And also, there's always a risk of being too expert-driven versus having an ear to the ground. So there are no easy solutions, but how do we keep ethics at the core of policy design when we think of transitions? There's a need for greater dialogue and cooperation, especially for burden sharing. What if some of these decisions do not pan out the way they were expected to. How can governments share this burden and yet be bold in these transitions while keeping ethics at the core? We should not be afraid of revisiting the policy design if needed, because we are facing a world with increasing uncertainty, and we have to revisit our policy design. Do things make sense even today as they did 5 or 6 years ago? Education and capacity building of civil society to take ownership and to be part of the policy dialogue. And also information asymmetry has to be avoided at all costs. Many times ethical concerns arise because communities lack information, and information is power when we think of ethics. So I'll just stop at that, and I'll be happy to take any questions later. Thank you.
So next, I'm going to invite Associate Professor Alfred Wu for his presentation. He's going to focus on the role of empathy in the public administration education. Please. Good afternoon.
My topic actually is not very much about quantitative study. So if students who are eager to learn quantitative study, this is not that type of research. We don't have big data here. And also, more or less, it's kind of a reflection of teaching over the past few years. So I try to have an introduction about the role of empathy in public affairs education, and also talking about research method and policy implications. So I made this using ChatGPT. You know that this is ChatGPT. And I particularly asked to benchmark against Singapore's context. I would say that when I was teaching here, in our classroom, we hardly talk about empathy. We mostly talk about efficiency. We aim very high. Singaporeans also have kiasu culture. So you always want to get a better result. But in terms of appreciation, I would say that this part, we did not have that all the time, particularly in the classroom. So I think it's something you try to understand other people's situation using your imagination. So according to one Nature article, they talk about that we have a number of stages of empathy. So sometimes it's called cognitive empathy. You understand the issue. So someone in difficult situation, you understand that. Then sometimes you have emotional attachment. It means that you feel sorry for them, but you still be able to distinguish yourself and others. Finally, you may try to offer some help to others. Then this is the third one, called motivational empathy. Motivational empathy is most important in public administration. This article title actually is very interesting, talking about AI will never convey the essence of human empathy. I don't know whether in the future this kind of argument will be challenged. So in terms of our discourse about diversity, equity, and inclusion has been very much discussed in the MPA teaching all the time. But sometimes we face a lot of challenges when we talk about diversity, how to embrace diversity and also inclusion. Many people tend to actually just embrace someone who are really like them. So it's very hard for some civil servants, particularly civil servants who are like administrative service, part of civil servant. They have no idea about how other people live a life. Maybe they have a car, they have a driver. Ordinary people, they don't. So sometimes I would say that in our MPA teaching, it's very important to bring this topic and also ask students to reflect on that and also understand other people's circumstance. For example, in our MPA teaching, we talk a lot about innovation. Then one guy from Sri Lanka told us, if I do something so-called innovative, particularly in foreign service, then my boss will be very angry because I supposedly should not actually use this way to do things. But in Singapore, in some resource, very rich countries, I don't know, maybe you can do that. So our preliminary finding is based on students' survey feedback. People think we should actually try to develop resilience and also empathy towards each other to co-create very much conducive teaching and learning environment. Let's document it in our survey. So I did a survey in 2020, just after COVID outbreak. Then we had 2 rounds of surveys. We tried to utilize Hong Kong and Singapore's context. Because I was based in Hong Kong for 10 years, now I moved here. So I tried to tap into some of our PhD students, originally here at Aliquot School, now teaching in UK. So the sample size is quite small, 100, 200 in different contexts. We do try to see whether they have online learning experience. In Hong Kong, they had much more. The reason is very simple. Hong Kong had social unrest in 2019. So social unrest pushed them to do more like online learning and teaching. Singapore, much more later, 2020. But I just try to briefly share with you, we focus on some aspects. Some aspects it's about individual and also environmental support. It means that whether you have environmental support for your learning. Then second item is about learner control. It means that whether you can control your own learning, you can control your own learning pace. So that's some sort of pedagogical innovation. They talk about personalized learning. Then some also refer to institutional support. Then finally, it's about students evaluate how much they learn from this process. So I guess you can imagine that I also want to ask you to second guess which part Singapore is doing better. I guess it's institutional support because we all adopt a top-down approach, then we know how to actually respond to crises. And also Singaporean students also are much better in terms of, saying that we get some, better result. We actually adopt personalized learning because of it's a kind of learning-focused society. But in the meantime, when you compare, Hong Kong has much, much lower rating of accessibility and also confidence in the system because a lot of disruption. But in the meantime, Hong Kong appreciate learning outcome much more. So the conclusion is very simple. Hong Kongers are much more appreciative of learning because they know that it's not easy. In 2019, they had lots of social movements, and also they are much more, trapped in different kind of scenarios. Social protests, later on actually COVID. But Singaporeans, I would say that enjoy very, very good environment. In the meantime, based on some particularly qualitative data, when students actually not only fill in the item like 1 to 7, they also write something. Singaporeans actually become kinder under this context. Later on, I will share with you. Many students talk about that they appreciate the use of supportive words in communication. Then whether fellows, peers could check in. So if I'm done, if I'm not okay, someone will be checking. Then students also talk a lot about belonging. Whether I can actually have a sense of belonging here when we study public administration at the Kuan School of Public Policy. So our discussion is probably culturally wide. Singaporean is much more embrace Gyatso culture. So they actually adopt learning methods from early age. Then they try very, very hard to get a better academic outcome. But Hong Kong, I would say that much more business society, they know that it's a city with lots of turbulence from all the time since a colonial period. So in general, I would say these two places, people make it very clear that they want to have empathy toward each and every student. These are not only refer to peers, also refer to faculty and student interaction. So our argument is nowadays we have lots of new things, particularly about AI education. In the US, they also have NASPA. NASPA actually really talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But my argument is we should actually really put empathy as a cornerstone, particularly in MPA education, and also try to make our students who are mid-career civil servants to understand empathy as early as possible. Then when they go back, they will be in a better position. So that's the reason we say that we need to bring empathy back in public administration education. That's all. Thank you.
So our third panelist is Professor Hyunjun Kim. He worked as a vice chair of the Diversity Council in Korea University. So Professor Kim, the floor is yours.
Can I use this? Oh, okay. Okay, today I'm here to present diversity experiences, sharing insights from Korea University's Diversity Council's activities. I believe these experiences align well with our session theme today, which is Enduring Journey, Embracing Diversity and Inclusion in Our Community. Okay. This is Korea University's emblem. It features a tiger, symbolizing the Korean people's spirit. The tiger represents the university's emphasis on tradition. The emblem circle is filled with three core values, which is Libertas, Justitia, and Veritas, which means liberty, justice, and truth. These photos capture the vibrant spirit of Korea University's Ypsilanti event, which is a significant tradition for Korea University students. Known for its red color, passion, and unity, the university emphasizes these values more than anything else. Participating in such events fosters a strong sense of belonging among the Korea University students. However, questions arose whether these traditions are sufficient for the 21st century. This reflection was a key motivation for creating the Korea University's Diversity Council. Click.
Autumn 2020, the annual Korea Yonsei Games were canceled due to the pandemic. We missed the sweat, the cheering, the passion that filled the stadium. On each game day, together we seemed like one raging red wave. On a closer look, however, there's someone laughing, someone shouting, someone having trouble bearing the noise, someone looking around. There's a colorful variety within ourselves. This place might feel quite unfamiliar to someone next to me. That could have been myself. Crimson, scarlet, burgundy, subtly different shades of red, gathered to form a single beautiful one. We look forward to seeing this beauty at Goyeonjeon.
This video was created by the council in 2020 to share the importance of diversity with our community. We believe that diversity or diversitas in Latin should be added to our existing core values of libertas, justitia, and veritas. At the same time, we aim for a future where diversitas is so integrated our culture that it no longer requires special attention. The mission of the Diversity Council was to protect and promote diversity at Korean University by fostering openness, inclusiveness, and equity. There are 5 main activity areas which include education, research, policy, culture, and communication. All these activities are aimed at promoting diversity at the Korean University community. This slide describes some developmental stages of the council. It was created in 2019 under the president's leadership. However, in 2023, following changes in university policy, we became part of the Human Rights and the Gender Equality Center to further integrate our mission. This slide gives a quick overview of our key activities as of March 2023. Our efforts focus on educational programs, content creation and promotion, and activities supporting diversity policies. I'll explore in details of these activities in the following slides. First of all, we focus on undergraduate level education programs. We expanded the Diversity for the Future course from the Seoul campus to Sejong campus. Additionally, our Changemakers program was in its 3rd year in 2023, involving students in an 8-month training programs to develop their diversity competence and launch campaigns. These photos document activities from the Changemakers program. On the left, students designed so-called dreamwear clothing that features patches representing 10 core values. This initiative encourages students to express their individuality, moving away from uniformity of typical student university branded jackets, often worn by Korean college students. For our graduate students, we organized Graduate Student Diversity Research Challenge. We've hosted the Think Within Talk Across Symposium twice. This concept suggests that while we study within our majors, we can learn more by engaging across boundaries. This approach has expanded participation and also diversified research topics. Let's look at our publications and related events. Over 2.5 years, we've published 39 issues of the monthly Diversitas booklet, featuring nearly 80 articles. We've hosted 2 book talk shows with authors of the most popular articles published in the Diversitas. Additionally, selected pieces from Diversitas series were published in a commercial book titled Harmonious Diversity, which was recognized as one of the best books in the year of 2022 by the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism and distributed to the public libraries nationwide. And English and Chinese translation are also available for download by going to the QR code over there. And our animated videos are designed to promote diversity values. One of these videos was shown in the beginning of my presentation today. The first video aimed to spark interest within the Korean University community, while the second one focused on sharing the positive aspects of diversity under the title of The Value of Diversity. We've taken active steps to promote diversity within the Korea University community and encourage participation. For example, a key initiative was announcing the diversity statement, making diversity a crucial criterion in our management and policy. Additionally, we introduced the Diversity Award to recognize individuals and organizations contributing to the spread of diversity. Our council has implemented policies to integrate diversity into management practices. For example, we reviewed the campus regulations for diversity sensitivity and developed some policy improvement recommendations. Besides internally focused activities, our council has worked to extend our internal achievements externally. In 2022, we were invited to host a talk concert at the Tongyeong International Music Festival. Additionally, at the government request, we conducted a 2-year-long study using the KU Diversity Index to assess corporate diversity in the private sector. Now let me talk about the Korea University Diversity Index. These slides present the results of our surveys using the KU Diversity Index conducted in 2019 and 2021. KUDI-1 utilized objective ecological diversity indicators, while KUDI-2 assessed the subjective experiences of our university members. Overall, diversity at Korea University has shown slight improvement since 2019. We believe our council's efforts have contributed to the progress. At the very least, discussing diversity is no longer seen as a novel issue at Korea University. Although it was a decision we had hoped might go differently, the university administration decided to merge the council into the Human Rights and the Gender Equality Center in 2023. In response, we established the Diversity Research Center to focus on our research and educational activities. The Diversity Research Center focuses on advancing diversity assessment tools, enhancing diversity training programs, and the development of diversity content. Over about 4 years of period, around 35 professors voluntarily participated in our diversity campaign. I was curious about the sources of their dedication. So I asked them what motivated them to join. Here are their responses. I'm not sure whether you can read it. Can you guess which one is mine? Whenever you are given with a difficult question, the answers will be the longest one or the shortest one. I prepare actually a gift if you get it right. Anyone? My answer is a little bit longer than that one. Actually, at the right bottom corner, I was called, I went, and I got hooked. But I guess among these comments, responses, the quote at the center represents the common belief shared by the members of the council. The axiom that differences should not lead to discrimination and the theorem that diversity makes society a better place are the reasons for participating in the Diversity Council. So, as I conclude, I hope this presentation has encouraged you to explore ways to embed diversity as a core value of our society. Thank you for listening.
So our last panelist will be Ms. Chung, Assistant Director of the GovTech in Singapore. Please.
Alrighty. Okay, I'm lucky last. I do not have slides, so you get to enjoy the dulcet tones of my voice, and hopefully that will keep you suitably entertained and/or informed for the next couple of minutes. My name is Ming. I lead the accessibility and I recognize someone in the audience. Hello, ex-colleague. Sorry, very excited. I lead the accessibility enabling team over at GovTech, Ally Team for short. We started about 2.5 years ago now. We got our official mandate in April of 2022. And the objective of our team is to try and make all of the government's digital services accessible. In fact, we've made a very public commitment as part of the Ministry of Social Welfare and Families Enabling Master Plan of 2030, that by 2030, 100% of all high traffic government sites will be fully accessible. I'll let you know if we succeed. But the ambition is to do that. Part of the reason we started this was, you would think as members of the government that something like diversity, equity, and inclusion would be very high on the agenda, and it is. But ironically, because the government has to serve everybody, it then makes it slightly complicated because suddenly everything is important. So it's even more important then to be able to articulate exactly why this particular group of people needs a little bit more money or a little bit more time or a little bit more people looking at that particular problem. And that was the genesis of how my team started. Partly actually because of COVID, things were already getting digital very, very quickly. And thanks to COVID, that was massively accelerated. I was gonna ask you to guess, but in the interest of time, I will just tell you. We have about 100 new services every year that go digital. And that's a huge number when you consider that there are about 500 services already that are online. So there's a massive amount of touch points that people can reach out to the government and transact with the government with in a digital space. But that also means that increasingly digital is becoming very, very important in the way that we as citizens can interact with our government. So it's very important that people can. So my team started by looking at how people with disabilities use technology and how we can help those people to interact with government. But increasingly our mandate has also moved into helping seniors. Because fun fact, by 2030, 1 in 4 people in Singapore are going to be 65 years old or older. And that number jumps to 1 in 3 by 2040. That's staggering. So that means we should have started thinking about this stuff yesterday. But since we didn't start yesterday, today's just as good a time to start figuring out how are we going to make sure that everybody's taken care of. Because it's a ticking time bomb, whether we like it or not. Singapore's not unique in this way. I just happen to know the Singapore number is the best. We are just aging as a population. So a lot of the stuff that we often think about for people with disabilities, making sure that the color contrast on a website is sharp enough so people can read what's happening, making sure the font is big enough, and if you enlarge the font that you don't disrupt the UI so badly that buttons go missing or text goes like slightly off screen and you can't make sense of it. All of those things are very important for somebody who maybe has a visual impairment. But actually, if you're a little bit older, and I'm getting there too, and you suddenly realize, I can't read that as well as I did last year. Actually, it's important to us to be able to expand font and make sure contrast is right. So it's not just about PWDs. Actually, increasingly, it's about a lot of other folks in society as well. If you want a nice, snappy statistics to think about it, about 15% of the global population identifies as a person with a disability. So it's something that they're living with, something they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I would challenge you, instead of thinking that 15% of us have some kind of disability, consider that 85% of us are temporarily abled. Because at some point, your eyesight is going to go, your hearing is going to get a bit fuzzy, it's going to take just that little bit longer in the morning to get out of bed because your back hurts. So it's a matter of time. It's just some people got there before we did. So if you don't remember anything else but what I say, 85% of us are temporarily abled. It's going to catch up with us at some point. So it's really important to be thinking about diversity and inclusion right from the start when we're designing our digital services. And if you hadn't already caught on, the model that we follow, my team follows anyway, therefore, is the social model of disability, where we look at the mismatch between the human and the environment. So a lot of us will be introduced to disability through some kind of medical definition, but in some ways that's quite limiting because it doesn't account for things like, say, autism, right? Or dyslexia. Dyslexia, some people don't designate as a disability, admittedly, but it does just make reading stuff a little bit more difficult. Funnily enough, actually, if you are a native Japanese speaker, you tend to get diagnosed faster with dyslexia once you have to start reading English because of the way that your typescript shows up. So little details like that actually can make quite a significant difference to somebody's quality of life when they're having to navigate the internet. Specifically on the policy front, which I know is kind of what you're here to hear about, to listen to, my team looks at digital services specifically, and one of the things we're working on right now is how to come up with some kind of standard that articulates how we should be designing our digital services. So if you load a website, it should have the following X, Y, and Z. If you're using a mobile app, it should have A, B, and C. In places overseas like the US, Australia, Canada, the EU, they have legislation in place to protect these sort of requirements, and it's usually couched under some sort of anti-discrimination legislation. We do not have that stance in Singapore, and for now, the government doesn't really want to make it a legislative feature. We would rather make it some kind of standard or policy. And part of the reason for that is what we can see happening in places where it is legislatively required. So if you look at the US, for example, there are a lot of laws, and if your website is not compliant, you are fined $10,000 a day until you make it compliant. And yet all we see actually are a series of lawsuits suing people to make things compliant, but actually the quality of life and the quality of that interaction online is still not very good. So rather than turning us into a litigious society, where we're sort of whacking each other with sticks, we prefer to encourage people to do it more from a place of good rather than a place of fear. So currently my team is working on a set of standards. We will initially roll it out to public sector, and if I can convince all my public service colleagues to do it, then we will try and see if we can persuade other folks in the private sector to come along with us as well. So policy is a really important part. But I can stand here and espouse policy all day, but if I don't raise awareness and if I don't educate people, on the importance of these things, I'm only going to get so far, and I might end up having to resort to a stick rather than a carrot. So another key thing that my team is doing is educating people on what we're talking about. So there's technical training, which is really important. When you talk about digital accessibility online, there's some things, tricks, tips that you need to know when you're building your website, but that's not the fun stuff. The fun stuff that we do is more to help teams contextualize the work that they're doing. So it's not just me telling you on a soapbox, this is really important. It's to help you understand how your work affects your users. So for example, there was an app that was going to be launched a couple years ago, and their target audience was people 60 and over. But when I asked them, how many people have you tested with? They hadn't tested with anybody over the age of 45. I was like, is it any surprise you're going to get a bunch of people now onboarding your app and having a huge number of problems because you haven't actually tested it with the people that are actually going to use it? Of course, they looked at me blank-faced and thought, but we always only test with this group of people. I was like, and that's great. Thank you for doing your user testing. But you now need to shift your focus slightly to the actual group of people that you want to use your app. It sounds like common sense when I say it in one sentence, but it was such an aha moment for that team. And I actually think that's probably the more interesting thing that my team does, more than just the policy stuff, is to kind of help people have these realizations and just to contextualize the importance of their work. And tied to that is outreach. So education is very much a sort of one-on-one thing, but outreach allows us to reach a wider audience. There's a saying in the disability community that nothing for us without us. Because it's very important, yes, as some of my fellow panelists have alluded to, we can make decisions in ivory towers, but if I'm not actually talking to the people that will be affected by these policies, these decisions, then I'm not really making very good policy. And so the only way I can really do that is if I'm actually going to talk to the people. So to avoid the situation of unknown unknowns, go and speak to the people who are actually going to be affected by this and ask them, actually, did you really want that service? Do you really want X, Y, and Z there? And they will be in the best position to tell you, yes, no, maybe. Have you actually considered a third option? We recently ran something called the Co-Creation Lab back in May. We invited 100 people down to the MCI, now MDDI building in Clarke Quay. We had 20 seniors, 20 folks from the PWD community, and the balance was all private sector digital teams. And we got everyone to sit down and have a very open and frank conversation with each other about why people are struggling to use their services, but then conversely also give the tech teams a chance to say, there were certain reasons why we designed it this way. It wasn't that we attempted to exclude you. There could have been some security reasons, maybe sometimes a lack of awareness, or sometimes just didn't even occur to us that this was a problem. It's the start of what I hope will be a series of many conversations between public and private sector, and also members of the, as in the user community from the private sector. But at least it was a start to getting people to talk to each other and try and really, uncover those unknown unknowns so that we can make better informed decisions. There is another conversation around digital access. A lot of what I'm talking about assumes you already have access to digital services, but if you don't have access to Wi-Fi or a smartphone, a lot of what I do is redundant. And I have colleagues that are looking at that to make sure that people have access to things like Wi-Fi, data plans, and devices that can access the internet. But, so if you don't, first, the stat you should remember is 85% of us are temporarily abled. The second one, if you don't remember anything else, is progress over perfection. Often we get quite wrapped up in the idea of we need to do a ton of research and find out as many things as possible before we get started. But I say just get started. Just start. It is better than sitting there and wondering for a long time what to do. If you don't know where to get started, just ask people. Go and meet someone that you don't usually talk to and ask them, hey, how do you find this thing? Is it easy to use? Is it not easy to use? Because no two disabilities will present the same way. No two people age the same way. And so the only way we can really make sure that we're being really diverse and equitable and inclusive in the way that we're designing things is if we just talk to a lot of people. Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to the discussion Q&A session, but we'll move the sofa first, and then our panelists will sit over there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the Q&A session. If you have any questions, please raise your hand.
We either did a really good job or we scared everybody.
Any questions from the audience?
I think there is.
Yeah.
Thank you, panelists. I'm Hishan from NTU. I'd like to ask Prof. Alfred Wu, difference between emotional empathy and motivational empathy. Because you say emotional empathy is a difference between the self and other. Does it mean for motivational empathy there's no difference?
Yeah. So sometimes when we encounter some people, for example, they come for getting government subsidy, then because of family members become disabled. For example, if I only express that, oh, sorry to hear about that, then we process on something, or you do something much more substantial, asking for more detailed information. And also, in addition to this kind of subsidy, can we do something? I just want to share with you, when I take a taxi, sometimes people will think Lee Kuan Yew School is a part of government, because with the name of Lee Kuan Yew. Then once the conversation started like this, I asked the person why he became a Grab driver. At that time, still was an Uber driver. Then he told me that he could not actually be on a regular job because his wife suddenly had a mental health issue. So some sort of a suicidal tendency. Then why he want to have more information with me? Because he think I could pass some information to government. The reason is very simple. In the past, the public sector worker dealing with him always express empathy to him, asking a lot of questions about his latest situation, although will not actually offer more money for him. But the latest one, every time just iron face. So basically like a stem, then you go. So this guy actually was a little bit upset. Saying that although I got the same money, but the interaction looked very, very bizarre on his side. So I think that part of our conversation actually really inspired me to look more about empathy in public administration. I don't know whether I answered your question. Maybe I moved too far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got another question for Prof. Yun, Prof. Kim.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
For the you see diversity and inclusion in Korea, but in terms of Singapore's context, where race and religion is not as homogeneous, what are your thoughts on using the same tools? For example, you got the gymwear clothing, right? Gymwear. How do you think it will apply to a different country, different context?
Actually, well, Korea has been known as a very homogeneous community. So it is much more urgent for Korea to think about diversity issues in any other places. I guess Singapore is in a position of very much being advantageous because in terms of population, you are composed of a variety of ethnic backgrounds. So this is a better place to promote diversity. So for example, in our Korea University, we have experienced some difficulties to make people to understand that this is an important value we have to pursue in the future because people feel kind of comfortable by being together with the people with the similarities. So I guess I would say that it was much more challenging in Korea to promote diversity compared to other more already diverse communities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, it was really nice to talk about values, ethics. I just had a question in general. I don't know if you all have any thoughts. When we talk about embracing diversity and inclusion in our communities, it sort of seems to be this umbrella issue that encompasses a lot, right from the level of policy at an international level to the grassroots. What even individuals are thinking about another person, about their neighbor, about someone with either disability, someone who looks different from them, who has a different color of their skin. So for me, it's a question of consciousness, of how conscious you are that the other is not actually the other. We are all interconnected. We are all one human family. So I think a lot of the problems, like on the environment, on disability, all of these issues can be overcome when you recognize this as a fact, not as a utopian ideal, but as a fact that we are all one human family. So I don't know, I just wanted to know what your thoughts are on how this awareness can increase among communities, among families, and then just increase. Yeah, thank you.
So maybe a hot take because I come from a digital agency, but I think social media has a lot to do with stopping this and also the pace of modern life. I wouldn't say necessarily if we went back 50 years that people were more inclusive necessarily, but I think when you have time after work to go and spend time with people in a meaningful way and you have the headspace and the energy to do it, it allows you also to be open to empathy. Because if you finish your first shift at 8 p.m. at night and you have like 30 minutes to eat dinner, then you run home, you probably don't have much energy in the tank left to sit there and have a meaningful conversation with someone. You're just looking for sound bites, and then that's exacerbated by social media, which it used to be 140 characters. I don't know what Elon Musk has done to the platform, but very, very short, quick things. I mean, TikTok is even shorter now. How can you have a nuanced conversation about something that's more complex if I've only got your attention for 10 seconds? So I would say find a way to, I think we should encourage people to find more time to spend with other human beings rather than proxies for human interaction, but then also to try and safeguard a bit of like headspace so that when you are there, you can actually be present so that you can understand. That actually might be the utopia, but I'm hopeful. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add on that I agree, social media has a big role to play in terms of either promoting or breaking stereotypes. And my own understanding of many issues has changed over time since I was a child, growing up, and exposure to different cultures, I think, makes a lot of difference, but also how open you are. So we can see narratives around gender, for example, changing so much, how different gender types are portrayed in media, and also social norms, what was acceptable 50 years ago versus what seems horrifying today, that all this used to happen 50 years ago. So even that is changing. So openness and our acceptance that we are living in a world which is evolving, and that there are many things which lines are blurry among what is right and wrong. So we are also evolving as social beings, but being open to that, I think, really helps.
Yes, my name is Henry. Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy is a global school. Yeah. So I would like to take this opportunity to ask the Korean faculties about the because I had a Korean students about 8 years ago when I was the head of the international school. I also study the higher education, so I'm quite familiar with the university in Korea. I have visited ERA, Women University, and also National Seoul University. The point I want to make is, in Korea, how Korean feel, those who study ERA, Women University, is it fall within the inclusion? So this is a question. I hope you can answer about that. And also, National Seoul University, where every year thousands, of Koreans, sitting for the Korean national exams in order to go to the top universities in Korea and later on become a civil servant. So, how you look at diversity or DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some put it inclusive. Yeah. So that is the question. I hope you can shed some light on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me try to answer your question. First of all, I believe that realizing diversity as a value requires acquiring certain capabilities. For example, empathy should be a part of that capacity capabilities. And we need to develop some ethical capabilities. So by saying that, we may ask this question, whether Koreans, and especially Korean elite students, are good at exercising those capabilities. My answer is no. We have been very much focused on some kind of elitism. We are trying to pursue some efficiency in development. Well, I would say that we Koreans didn't have such a luxury to think about diversity as a value. Diversity used to be considered as a cost. We were trying to minimize diversity, to maximize the efficiency. That model is not effective anymore. So we are at the point of understanding the necessity of pursuing diversity for the proliferation of our nation, our country, to the next level. Still, whether we have reached the mature point of diversity, my answer will be no. So, but we are trying to promote diversity as a prerequisite for our survival in the future. And you mentioned about Ewha Women's University. It is not Ewha Women's University. It was Ewha Women's University. There is a reason behind that naming. In the past, Korean females, their human rights were not well respected. So that the founder of the university believed that we have to educate individual women. That's why I call their name the university instead of Women University, Women's University. We are educating individual, independent women. So that indicates the historical background of diversity in Korea.
I'll get the last question here.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about intergenerational considerations when it comes to diversity. I must say that I was very amazed to hear the panel speaking just now. Hardly anyone talk about race. Korea, for example, I thought it's so homogeneous society, but when you describe about the challenges of diversity, inclusivity, I find it really amazing. So my question is actually, if I may, I was almost killed during racial riots in 1964 in Singapore. The Chinese and Malays. And when I went to Libya, invited President Gaddafi, we stood up against President Gaddafi because he wanted all the Muslims to rally together to fight against the non-Muslims. We told him, no, we have to work with everyone. And the latest example I'd like to give, for example, the Pope's visit. The Pope, His Holiness, went to Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea. Majority are Catholics. But he also went to the largest Muslim country in the world, Indonesia. And then he came to Singapore, which is a multicultural. 70% Chinese, which are divided, Christians, Buddhists, Taoists, and what have you, minority Muslims. There again, I was trying to draw lessons about the Pope's choice of visiting these countries. So my question is actually, whenever I talk about these sort of issues, my own personal example, young Singaporeans will say, please lah, enough of your grandpa stories. We are not Chinese, we are not Malays, we are not Indians, we are Singaporeans. That's how the young look at themselves. They don't look at race anymore. But that's because they've had it so good for the last 20, 30 years in Singapore. The economy has done so well that they all benefited from the development, progress, and the fruits of economic progress. So my question is, how do you see these intergenerational considerations and challenges when it comes to making people understand diversity and inclusivity better? Economics, history, geography. How do you blend them all together? Thank you.
Okay, I'll go first. I have so many things to say, I need to organize them. I think what's really important actually is that we continue to teach history. Because in a lot of places, the younger generation forget because they did not have to go through the hardship. They have not had to deal with violence or discrimination directly. And so if we don't continue to talk about it, it's not that we harp on it and we hold on to grudges of the past, but I think it's important to remember that this did happen. And we must pay tribute to what has happened in the past. Also to make sure that people remember that this is where it came from and we must stand watch to make sure it doesn't happen again. Having said that, I think again also it's going back to that idea of being part of a broader community. So actually Indonesia, for example, in Jakarta, the biggest mosque in Jakarta is literally next door to the biggest Catholic church. And they share, like as in when people come to pray on Sundays and there's no space in the church, people go and park at the mosque. Like the Catholics will park their cars in the mosque, and it's perfectly fine. And similarly, when our Muslim friends go and pray on Fridays, if they have no space, they go and park their cars at the church. And because it's a very well-established part of the community, nobody thinks anything of it. If you've grown up with that, it's very natural, and it's not politicized. And again, I think because we don't really spend enough time in our community, don't spend enough time rather in our communities these days, again, there's that sense of overly simplifying, I think, some of the nuances. And then I think there is the added problem that, yes, increasingly younger folks, because they spend a lot of time online, are not necessarily just talking to people in previous generations. yeah, so again, I'm all about get off the digital stuff, go and have a meaningful conversation with someone. But again, I think we must pay tribute to what's happened in history, and I don't know if we do that enough. And that, I think, will help to remember, like, keep people mindful, but not necessarily inflame things that have happened before, just to help us put it in context.
Maybe I offer some not very nice example. I mean, in terms of intergenerational conflicts or solidarity, like Hong Kong, I had one paper about how people think about government subsidy, for example, allowance. The older generation, they rather like driving taxi, they will not actually try to tap into government resources. But a younger generation now, actually, they treat it as as kind of like entitlement. Very different mindset. So when we look into debate, younger generation will say that older folk actually eat up our resources. But the older people, when I ask them what kind of spending item you want to support, they will say that, I like, government could spend more money on public housing. In the meantime, education. But education actually is not for them. Education is for basic education. So they want to take care of, younger generations. So you could see that if we did not have any intervention, people just become very selfish. And also life experience also matter quite a lot because of why older generation in Hong Kong are much better to think in other people's perspective because of they suffer quite a lot when they were young. But for the younger generation, they mostly actually live in a very thriving Hong Kong. So they don't have any perspective in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for raising that. It's so important to consider intergenerational aspects. I'd just like to bring example of workplaces today. You've got multiple generations in the same office, but the outlook towards work is so different. And this is an advantage as well as a challenge. The challenge is that you've got seniors who might have a different mindset, and then the new generation is kind of coming in who have so many questions that they need to be driven by passion and belief in the organization and what it stands for. But they are being employed by people who are from a different generation who will value maybe hard work and commitment to the organization a lot more. But at the end of the day, both of them have to work together, and they both have to have conversations because they bring different skills on the table. So workplace, this really plays out very strongly today.
So thanks for all the questions and discussions. As we come to the close of our panel, I want to take a moment to reflect on the rich and insightful conversation we've had. One key takeaway from this panel, I think, is that inclusion is not a destination. I think it's an ongoing journey that requires sustained effort, collaboration, and commitment. So as we leave today, I hope you feel inspired and empowered to apply these insights to your own communities and to your own circles. I'd like to thank all the distinguished panelists for their invaluable contributions to this panel. And also, I'd like to thank all of you for your active participation. Your presence here, I think, signals some shared commitment to making inclusion as a reality for all. Thank you so much.